When a legendary racehorse was paralyzed after a devastating fall, the world gave up hope, except for a 6-year-old girl. What she did next left everyone in awe. The pounding of hooves echoed like a rolling thunderstorm, a relentless drumbeat of power and speed. Spirit, the world-renowned racehorse, surged ahead, his gleaming copper coat a blur against the dusty track. The crowd roared as he pulled into the final stretch, his strides longer, his breath even, and his determination unmatched. Victory was just moments away. Suddenly, something went wrong. The horse just behind Spirit, a dark bay with a rider clad in red silks, made an aggressive move. The rider leaned forward, his crop flashing, not to urge his own horse, but aimed directly at Spirit's hind legs. It was a split-second action, almost invisible to the naked eye, but devastating in its impact. Spirit's stride faltered as his back leg was struck, sending him off balance. The stumble turned catastrophic. Spirit's front hooves caught on uneven ground, and his powerful body pitched forward. He crashed to the track with a sickening thud, his legs crumpling beneath him. Gasps rippled through the audience like a shockwave. People leapt to their feet, craning their necks to see what had happened. The commentator's voice cracked over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, Spirit is down." The dark bay surged forward, its rider barely glancing back as he thundered over the finish line. The crowd's cheers for the apparent winner were muted, overshadowed by the collective horror unfolding on the track. Spirit lay still, his once bright eyes darting wildly in fear and pain. His jockey, flung forward by the sudden fall, lay motionless a few feet away, crumpled in the dirt. The trainer, watching from the sidelines, felt his heart drop. "No," he whispered, already vaulting over the railing to reach his horse. Stable hands rushed in behind him, and medical staff sprinted toward the fallen pair. "Get the medics! Now!" a stable hand shouted. The jockey, Spirit's trusted partner for years, hadn't moved since hitting the ground. His helmet was cracked, and blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. Medics rushed to him first, carefully rolling him onto a stretcher. Meanwhile, Spirit's trainer, a wiry man with years of racing experience etched into his weathered face, knelt by the horse. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Come on, boy. Not like this. You're stronger than this." Spirit, trembling, tried desperately to rise, his legs twitching as he struggled. The sight was gut-wrenching. His back legs refused to cooperate, collapsing under his own weight each time he attempted to push himself up. The trainer knelt beside him, his hand resting gently on Spirit's neck. "Easy, boy. Easy," he murmured, though his voice trembled with fear. "We've got you." The crowd stood frozen, many clutching their hats or hands over their mouths. A little boy, perched on his father's shoulders, began to cry. "Is Spirit gonna die, Dad?" he asked, his small voice trembling. "No," the man said firmly, though his own face was pale. "I hope not." The ambulance for horses pulled onto the track, its doors opening as the crew quickly set up a sling to carefully lift Spirit. The medics attending the jockey confirmed he had a concussion, but no life-threatening injuries. The same couldn't be said for Spirit, whose labored breathing and limp legs painted a grim picture. 2 days later, Spirit was back at Pine Valley, the serene ranch in Montana where his career had begun. The contrast was jarring. The ranch's rolling fields and golden autumn leaves were a far cry from the chaos of the racetrack. But instead of galloping freely, Spirit was confined to a stall, his powerful legs swaddled in layers of bandages. An IV drip hung by the corner, and a faint antiseptic smell replaced the earthy aroma of hay. The stable hands worked in near silence. Even the other horses seemed subdued, their occasional nickers soft and mournful. The trainer stood by the stall, staring at Spirit's prone form. His calloused hands gripped the wooden railing so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Dr. Chen arrived mid-morning, her black medical bag slung over one shoulder. She had been treating Pine Valley's horses for years, but today her usual confident demeanor was tinged with visible concern. "How's he doing?" she asked, stepping into the stall. "Not good," the trainer admitted. "He tries to move, but—" Dr. Chen knelt by Spirit, running her hands gently along his spine, feeling for abnormalities. Spirit let out a soft, distressed nicker, his ears twitching at her touch. She paused, her face grave. "It's what I feared," she said quietly, turning to the trainer. The fall caused severe trauma to his spinal cord. There's swelling, and it's cutting off the signals to his hind legs. The trainer's breath hitched. "Can he recover?" Dr. Chen hesitated, her eyes falling to the ground. "I won't lie to you. The odds aren't great. He's stable for now, but without the ability to stand or move, his body will start to shut down. Horses aren't built to lie down for long periods." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The trainer turned away, blinking rapidly to keep the tears at bay. "He's been through so much," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And he was so close to winning." Dr. Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not over yet. Let's focus on keeping him comfortable and reducing the swelling. We'll do everything we can." The barn was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. In the farthest stall, Spirit lay unmoving, his once powerful legs now bound in soft bandages. The air carried a faint scent of antiseptic, mixing awkwardly with the familiar aroma of hay and leather. Outside, the crisp autumn wind rustled through the leaves, but none of it seemed to matter. "Where's Daddy?" A small voice broke the silence. 6-year-old Hannah stood at the edge of the stall, her backpack slipping from her tiny shoulders. The bag was far too big for her, stuffed with schoolbooks and a few carefully chosen treats for Spirit, 2 carrots and a peppermint, wrapped in napkins. Her father, the trainer, had been at Spirit's side for hours. He looked up from where he sat, cross-legged in the straw. His face was weary, lined with sleeplessness and worry. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, trying to muster a smile. Hannah's eyes darted to Spirit and she frowned. The horse didn't lift his head or twitch his ears at the sound of her voice, the way he usually did. That wasn't like him. "Why's he not standing up, Daddy? He's supposed to be better by now." Her small hands gripped the stall door as if she might yank it open. Her father sighed, brushing hay from his jeans as he stood. "It's not that simple, Em," he said gently, walking over to her. "Spirit's hurt real bad. It'll take time, maybe more time than we got." Hannah's little face scrunched in defiance. "That's not true. He's Spirit. He can do anything." She pushed past her father and scrambled into the stall, kneeling beside the horse's massive frame. Spirit's breathing was steady but shallow. Hannah reached out and placed a hand on his neck, stroking the coppery fur that had once gleamed in the sunlight. "You're okay, right, Spirit?" she whispered, leaning close. "You're gonna get better. I know you will." Her father watched from the doorway, a lump forming in his throat. He had tried to shield her from the worst of it, but Hannah had seen the fall on live TV. She had watched Spirit, her favorite horse in the whole world, crash to the ground in front of thousands of spectators. And now, nothing he could say would keep her from believing she could fix it all. Hannah's connection with Spirit had been instant. From the first day she toddled into the barn at Pine Valley, too small to even reach his shoulder, she declared him her best friend. "He's not just a horse," she told anyone who would listen. "He's magic." Hannah stayed by Spirit's side all day, reading to him from her favorite picture book about horses and knights. Her voice was soft but steady, her tiny fingers flipping the pages carefully. When her father brought her lunch, she barely looked up. "He likes it when I read to him," she explained. But as the days passed, Spirit's condition didn't improve. Dr. Chen came and went, her expression growing more grim each time. Hannah overheard the adults talking in low voices outside the barn one evening. "If he can't stand soon, we'll have to." "Make a decision," her father said reluctantly. His words were thick, like they pained him to say them aloud. Hannah didn't fully understand, but she knew enough to recognize the tone. It meant giving up. And giving up on Spirit wasn't something she could accept. That night, she lay awake in her small bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind buzzed with ideas. She had seen her mother help her little brother when he broke his leg last summer. He had worn a big, clunky cast, and their aunt had brought over special crutches to help him move around. "Why can't Spirit have crutches?" she whispered to herself. The next morning, Hannah was up before the sun. She tugged her aunt's sleeve at the breakfast table, her eyes wide and serious. "Aunt Lucy, you know how you help people walk again? With those things that hold them up? Could you do that for Spirit?" Her aunt blinked in surprise. "For Spirit? Honey, it's not quite the same. Spirit's—" She trailed off, seeing the determination in Hannah's gaze. "If people need help to stand, why not horses?" Hannah pressed. Her voice was small but unshakably firm. Lucy hesitated. The idea seemed absurd at first, but then again so had many of the breakthroughs she'd seen in her work. And Hannah's innocent logic had a way of cutting through doubts. "I suppose it's worth thinking about," she said slowly. Hannah didn't waste a moment. She grabbed her crayons and began sketching on a sheet of paper from her coloring book. She drew Spirit, suspended in what looked like a giant harness, his legs supported by bands. The drawings were crude, but they showed a spark of clarity beyond her years. By the time her father found her, Hannah had taped the drawings to the barn wall beside Spirit's stall. "Look, Daddy," she said excitedly, pointing to the sketches. "We can help him stand up. Aunt Lucy said it might work." Her father stared at the drawings, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Hannah," he began, but she cut him off. "Don't say it won't work," she cried, tears welling up in her eyes. "Spirit needs us. We can't just leave him like this." Her voice cracked with emotion, and something in her father's chest ached. He crouched down, pulling her into a hug. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Em. We'll try." Later that day, Lucy arrived at Pine Valley with resistance bands and sketches of her own. She and Hannah explained their idea to Dr. Chen and the stable hands. Though skeptical, the adults couldn't ignore Hannah's conviction. By sunset, the barn buzzed with cautious hope. Hannah's drawings hung proudly on the wall, a symbol of the determination that had reignited the fight to save Spirit. As Hannah knelt beside the injured horse one last time before bed, she whispered, "We're gonna fix this, Spirit. You just wait and see." And for the first time in days, Spirit's ears twitched, ever so slightly, as if he understood. The barn buzzed with an odd mix of tension and hope as the morning sun spilled through the cracks in the wooden walls. Spirit lay in his stall, his copper coat now dulled, though the light still seemed to catch glimpses of its former brilliance. He had been improving, little by little. His wounds had healed well under the care of Dr. Chen and the dedicated stable hands, but his hind legs remained motionless. Every attempt to rise ended in exhaustion and frustration. In the small office just beyond the barn doors, Hannah's aunt, Lucy, sat surrounded by sketches, blueprints, and scattered tools. Engineers, technicians, and veterinarians clustered around her, their faces marked by both fatigue and determination. Hannah herself was perched on a hay bale just outside the office, her small hands clutching a pencil as she added yet another crayon drawing to her growing pile. "Are you sure this will work?" one of the engineers asked, his voice low but edged with doubt. Lucy, her hands steady despite the mounting pressure, looked up from the blueprint she had been revising for the third time that week. "No," she admitted, "but we've got no better option, and sometimes not knowing is what leads to breakthroughs." The process of creating the system was grueling. It took weeks of trial and error to develop something that could support Spirit's massive frame without causing further harm. Every design modification had to account for the horse's unique anatomy and the delicate balance of weight distribution. The engineers argued over materials, steel for strength, but lined with padding to prevent irritation. The veterinarians debated placement, how best to secure the bands and harness without putting undue pressure on Spirit's healing wounds. Lucy mediated it all, her expertise in physical therapy guiding the team towards solutions. But progress was slow. Hannah, never far from the action, would bring Spirit his favorite treats between discussions. Her quiet presence reminding everyone what and who they were working for. Months dragged on, and the cold Montana winter began to creep into the stables. The barn was outfitted with heaters to keep the chill at bay, but the work continued, often in gloves and thick jackets. By the time the first prototype was ready, it was nearly Christmas. On the day of the installation, the barn was alive with activity. 6 people worked carefully to position the massive frame around Spirit's stall. Each piece had been pre-assembled to fit together like a puzzle, but it still required precision to get everything into place. "All right, easy now," Lucy called as 2 stable hands lifted a padded harness, threading it carefully under Spirit's belly. The horse gave a low, tired nicker, but remained still, his trust in the people around him unshaken. Hannah watched from a safe distance, her hands clasped together tightly. Her father stood behind her, his broad shoulders a comforting presence. "It's going to work," Hannah said softly, almost as if trying to convince herself. "It better," her father replied. The process was slow, every movement deliberate. One slip could cause spirit pain or undo months of healing. The support bands were adjusted, tightened, and tested repeatedly, until the team was certain everything was secure. By late afternoon, the system was ready. Spirit lay in the sling, his body supported by the network of bands that crisscrossed the frame. Lucy gave a small nod to Dr. Chen, who stepped forward and placed a reassuring hand on Spirit's neck. "All right, big guy," Dr. Chen murmured. "Let's see what you can do." The barn was quiet except for the rhythmic creak of the harness system as Spirit shifted his weight. His muscles, stiff from months of disuse, trembled under the strain of standing. Each adjustment of the support band sent a shudder through his body, the pain evident in the flick of his ears and the tight clench of his jaw. "Easy, boy," Hannah's father said, his hands firm on the system controls. "Just a little longer." Hannah stood by Spirit's head, her small hands brushing his copper coat in soothing strokes. "You're doing great, Spirit," she murmured, her voice calm but tinged with worry. She could see the pain in his eyes, the way his muscles spasmed as they fought against years of instinct to rest. Spirit's hind legs quivered, locked in place as if frozen. Every attempt to move them seemed to ignite a fire of discomfort. His breath came in short bursts, nostrils flaring as he let out a low, distressed nicker. "Is he okay, Daddy?" Hannah asked, her voice small but steady. Her father glanced at her, his face lined with both focus and concern. "He's hurting, but he's trying," he said softly. "That's what matters." Spirit shifted again, his hooves scraping against the barn floor as he attempted to lift himself further. The system held most of his weight, but the effort still pushed his limits. When the pain became too much, he let out a sharp grunt and sagged against the sling, his legs trembling uncontrollably. Hannah dropped to her knees beside him, her heart aching at the sight of her friend struggling. "It's okay," she whispered, pressing her forehead gently against his. "You're so brave, Spirit. We'll take a break, okay?" Her father adjusted the system, lowering Spirit slightly to relieve the tension in his legs. The horse let out a long, shuddering exhale, his body visibly relaxing as the pressure eased. The days turned into weeks, and the training sessions continued. Spirit's muscles began to respond, but the progress was painstakingly slow. His hind legs, having grown rigid from months of immobility, were the hardest to rehabilitate. Each small movement sent ripples of pain up his spine, but Spirit endured, his eyes bright with determination even in the worst moments. Hannah was his constant companion. She sat beside him during every session, her voice a steady stream of encouragement. She told him stories about the other horses, about school, about her dreams of seeing him run again. After each session, she would reward him with a treat, an apple slice, a carrot, or his favorite peppermint, and praise him as if he'd just won another race. "You're amazing," she'd say, holding his head in her small hands. "The bravest horse in the whole world." Spirit, as if understanding her words, would nuzzle her shoulder or rest his heavy head in her lap. Sometimes he'd softly nicker, a sound so gentle it brought tears to her father's eyes more than once. One crisp morning, the barn buzzed with cautious excitement. Spirit had made steady progress in recent weeks, standing longer and straighter with each session. But today was different. "Today, we try for a step," Hannah's father announced, his voice filled with both determination and a hint of trepidation. Hannah's eyes widened. "You think he can do it?" she asked, her fingers tightening around the small bag of treats she carried. "He's ready," her father replied. "But we've got to be patient. It'll take time." As the team prepared the system, Hannah knelt beside Spirit. She placed a hand on his neck and leaned close. "You've got this," she said softly. "Just one little step, okay? I'll be right here." Spirit's ears twitched, his body tensing as the system lifted him into position. His legs wobbled but held firm as the harness steadied him. Hannah's father adjusted the controls, lowering the support slightly to encourage Spirit to bear more of his weight. For a long moment, nothing happened. Spirit stood still, his muscles taut with effort. The barn was silent except for the faint hum of the system and the sound of his breathing. Then, slowly, Spirit moved. His front legs stretched forward, his hoof scraping the ground as he shifted his weight. The movement was awkward and unsteady, but it was a step. "That's it, Spirit!" Hannah cried, her voice breaking with emotion. "You're doing it!" Her father's hands hovered over the controls, ready to intervene if needed, but Spirit didn't falter. His second step came quicker, though his hind legs trembled with the strain. By the third step, the entire barn seemed to hold its breath. When he finally stopped, Spirit let out a loud snort, his chest heaving with the effort. The team erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the barn. Hannah threw her arms around Spirit's neck, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with pride. "I knew you could." Word of Spirit's progress spread quickly. Veterinarians, trainers, and even journalists began visiting Pine Valley to see the miraculous recovery in action. They marveled at the system, but more than that, they were captivated by Spirit's determination and the unwavering bond between the horse and the little girl who refused to give up on him. Hannah's father, watching the visitors from the corner of the barn, shook his head with a quiet smile. "All this attention," he muttered to Lucy, who had come by to check the system's adjustments. Lucy shrugged, her face glowing with satisfaction. "It's not about them," she said. "It's about him and her." They both glanced at Hannah, who was sitting beside Spirit, feeding him slices of apple and chattering about how proud she was. Spirit, now lying comfortably on the barn floor, nickered softly in response, his eyes full of trust and gratitude. In that moment, it was clear that the road ahead, though still long, was one worth traveling. Each step Spirit took, no matter how small, carried with it a ripple of hope that reached far beyond the barn at Pine Valley. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Pine Valley, the golden light spilling through the barn's open doors. Inside, Spirit stood tall, his powerful legs steady beneath him, unassisted for the first time in months. His copper coat gleamed, and his eyes, once dulled by pain and fatigue, now sparkled with pride. Hannah clung to her father's arm, her small face glowing with joy. "Look, Daddy," she said, her voice trembling. "He's standing all by himself." "I see it, sweetheart," her father replied, his voice thick with emotion. He swallowed hard, glancing at Lucy and Dr. Chen, who stood nearby, both wearing triumphant smiles. The moment was nothing short of miraculous. After months of grueling therapy and the tireless work of so many hands, Spirit had defied the odds. Word of Spirit's recovery spread quickly. Videos of him standing, walking, and even trotting a few cautious steps circulated on social media, garnering thousands of views. The Child's Hope System, as Lucy had named it, was heralded as a groundbreaking innovation in veterinary medicine. Requests flooded in from stables and veterinary clinics across the country, all eager to implement the system for their injured horses. But for Hannah's father, the joy of Spirit's recovery was tempered by a quiet resolve. Watching Spirit regain his strength had filled him with pride, but it had also reminded him of the harrowing fall that had nearly ended the horse's life. One evening, as the family gathered in the barn, Hannah chattering excitedly about how Spirit might run again someday, her father cleared his throat. "Hannah," he said gently, "I've been thinking. Spirit's done enough running for one lifetime." Hannah's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" He crouched down to her level, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I mean, no more races," he said, his voice firm but kind. "It's too dangerous. I won't risk losing him again, not for a trophy or a title." Tears welled up in Hannah's eyes. "But he loves to run, Daddy," she said, her voice breaking. "He'll still run," her father assured her. "Just not like that. He's earned a right to be safe, to just be a horse." The announcement made headlines the next day. "Legendary racehorse Spirit retires to Pine Valley," read the title of one article. While fans expressed sadness, the overwhelming sentiment was one of understanding. Many praised the decision, calling it a testament to the bond between Spirit and his caretakers. The barn was quieter now, its usual buzz replaced by the calm routine of Spirit's new life. Visitors still came to see him, drawn by his story of resilience. Among them was a family with a young boy named Ben. Ben, no older than 6, had been diagnosed with autism. His parents had read about Spirit's journey and thought a visit to Pine Valley might help their son, who rarely spoke and struggled with overwhelming anxiety. When they arrived, Ben clung tightly to his mother's hand, his wide eyes darting nervously around the unfamiliar surroundings. Hannah greeted them warmly, but Ben shrank back, burying his face in his mother's coat. "It's okay," his mother said softly, stroking his hair. Hannah's father approached with spirit, the horse walking slowly and carefully beside him. "Why don't we let Spirit say hello?" he suggested. Spirit stepped closer, his movements gentle and unhurried. He lowered his head, sniffing the air near Ben as if sensing the boy's unease. Ben peeked out from behind his mother, his gaze locking with Spirit's. Then, something extraordinary happened. Spirit, usually reserved around strangers, let out a soft nicker and took another step closer. He gently nudged Ben's shoulder with his nose, the gesture tender and deliberate. Ben froze for a moment, his small body stiff. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he reached out a trembling hand and placed it on Spirit's muzzle. The barn fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone present. Ben's mother's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's never done that before," she whispered. Spirit stood perfectly still, his eyes calm and steady as Ben's fingers brushed his coat. For the first time, the boy seemed at ease, his breathing slowing as he rested his hand on the horse. Hannah's father watched, his chest tightening with a mix of awe and realization. Spirit wasn't just a survivor, he was something more. In the days that followed, the story of Ben and Spirit spread just as quickly as the news of Spirit's recovery had. Families with children facing similar challenges began reaching out, hoping that Spirit might work his magic for them too. At first, Hannah's father hesitated. Spirit had been through so much, he deserved peace and quiet. But as more and more families arrived, each with their own stories of struggle and hope, he couldn't ignore the impact Spirit was having. Spirit, it seemed, understood his new role. He greeted each visitor with the same calm demeanor, allowing children to touch him, talk to him, and simply be near him. For many, the experience was transformative. Pine Valley began to change. What had once been a humble stable became something greater. A place of healing, not just for injured horses, but for people too. Lucy worked tirelessly to refine the Child's Hope system, collaborating with veterinarians and engineers to make it accessible to more stables. Meanwhile, Hannah became Spirit's most devoted advocate. She spent hours with him every day, telling visitors his story and explaining how his resilience had inspired her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Hannah and her father stood by Spirit's paddock, watching him graze. "Do you think he knows?" Hannah asked quietly. "Knows what?" "That he's helping people," she said, her voice soft. Her father smiled, draping an arm around her shoulders. "I think he does," he said, "and I think he knows we'll help him every step of the way." As they stood there, the barn glowing in the fading light, it was clear that Spirit's story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The air was thick with anticipation as families, staff, and reporters gathered around the main paddock at Pine Valley. The autumn sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the stables that had transformed into a beacon of hope. Today wasn't just another day. It was a celebration, a moment to honor Spirit and the extraordinary journey that had brought him and the people around him to this point. Bunting fluttered gently in the breeze, and the smell of freshly baked pies wafted through the air from a long table where community members had contributed their best dishes. Laughter and chatter filled the space, yet everyone's gaze occasionally drifted toward the barn doors, where Spirit was being readied for his entrance. Inside the barn, Spirit stood calmly as Hannah gently brushed his coat, her hands steady despite the swirl of activity around her. She was dressed in a simple blue dress, her hair tied back in a ribbon that matched the deep copper hue of Spirit's gleaming coat. Her father stood nearby, adjusting his tie with a nervous energy that made Hannah giggle. "You don't have to be so fidgety, Daddy," she said, smiling up at him. "Spirit's the one everyone's here for, not you." Her father chuckled, but there was a sheen of emotion in his eyes. "Maybe so, but it's a big day for all of us," he said. He reached out and gently patted Spirit's neck. "Ready, big guy?" Spirit let out a soft nicker, his ears swiveling forward. He seemed to understand the importance of the day, standing proud and steady, a stark contrast to the fragile horse they had brought back to this barn months ago. Lucy appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "They're ready for him," she said with a smile. "And Hannah, they want you up front." Hannah nodded, her excitement barely contained. She gave Spirit's mane one last pat before walking beside him as her father led the way. The barn doors swung open and a hush fell over the crowd as Spirit stepped into the sunlight. The applause started slowly, then swelled into a thunderous cheer as Spirit made his way into the paddock. Children waved from the fence line and families clapped with genuine admiration. Spirit's recovery was more than just a local story now. It was a symbol of resilience and the incredible power of hope. Hannah stayed by his side, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She smiled and waved at the crowd, but her focus remained on Spirit. When they reached the center of the paddock, she leaned close and whispered, "You've got this." The event began with a speech from Hannah's father. He spoke about Spirit's journey, the tireless work of the Pine Valley team, and the innovative system that had helped Spirit and so many other horses regain their strength. "But this isn't just about the horses," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Spirit has shown us something bigger. He's reminded us how powerful connections can be between animals and people, between communities. And that's why Pine Valley isn't just a stable anymore. Today, we officially open as a center for equine therapy, for horses and for the kids who need them most." The crowd erupted into cheers again, their applause ringing out across the fields. In the months leading up to this day, the transformation of Pine Valley had been nothing short of remarkable. What had once been a quiet stable for racehorses was now a bustling center for rehabilitation and therapy. Stalls had been retrofitted to accommodate injured horses undergoing treatment with a Child's Hope system, while new facilities were built specifically for therapy sessions with children. Families from all over began bringing their kids to Pine Valley, hoping that the same horse who had inspired millions could help their children too. And Spirit didn't disappoint. One of the first therapy sessions had been with a young girl named Abby, who had lost her confidence after a traumatic experience at school. She had arrived at Pine Valley withdrawn, barely speaking, and hesitant to interact with anyone. Spirit, ever intuitive, had approached her slowly, lowering his head to her level. Abby had hesitated at first, but eventually reached out to touch him. From that moment on, she began opening up, little by little. By the end of her first session, she was smiling, brushing Spirit's coat with a gentleness that spoke volumes. Stories, like Abby's, became common at Pine Valley. Spirit's calm, patient demeanor seemed to draw children out of their shells, helping them overcome fears and build confidence. His presence in the therapy sessions became a cornerstone of the program, earning him the affectionate title of Teacher Spirit. As the ceremony continued, Lucy took the stage to talk about the impact of the Child's Hope system. She shared stories of horses across the country who had been given a second chance, their lives saved by the innovative system born right here at Pine Valley. "Spirit was our first success," she said, smiling at the horse standing tall in the paddock. But thanks to him, he won't be the last. The crowd gave another round of applause, but the loudest cheer came from Hannah, who beamed with pride. Toward the end of the event, the organizers invited Spirit and Hannah into the paddock center for one final moment. Hannah led Spirit to a small platform where a ribbon stretched across the entrance to the new therapy facility. "Ready, Spirit?" Hannah asked, her voice soft but full of excitement. Spirit flicked his ears forward and gave a gentle nicker, as if answering her. With a careful nudge from his nose, he helped Hannah break the ribbon, officially opening the new chapter for Pine Valley. The crowd roared with applause, and Hannah threw her arms around Spirit's neck, whispering, "You're amazing. You know that?" As the event wound down, families lingered, taking photos and chatting about the future of Pine Valley. Hannah's father stood at the edge of the paddock, watching Spirit interact with a group of children. A small boy, no older than 5, leaned against Spirit's side, his laughter ringing out as Spirit nuzzled his shoulder. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Lucy said, coming to stand beside him. "Yeah," he replied, his voice low. "I always knew Spirit was special, but this is something else." Lucy nodded. "He's found his purpose," she said simply. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over Pine Valley, Hannah and Spirit walked together along the edge of the paddock. The day had been long, but neither of them seemed tired. Hannah's hand rested on Spirit's neck, and he leaned into her touch, his steps slow and steady. "You've done so much, Spirit," Hannah said quietly, "and it's only the beginning." Spirit let out a soft snort, his ears flicking back as if he understood. Together they continued walking, their silhouettes outlined by the fading light. A girl and her horse, proof of what love, determination, and a little bit of hope could achieve. "Hey there, friends. Wow, what a journey we've just been on together. Spirit's story might be fictional, but it resonates so deeply, doesn't it? From the heart-pounding fall at the racetrack to the quiet, healing moments at Pine Valley, this story isn't just about a horse. It's about resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. One of the most beautiful lessons here is that life doesn't always go the way we plan. Spirit was a champion on the racetrack, but his greatest legacy wasn't in trophies. It was in how he inspired others to heal and believe again. It reminds us that sometimes when things fall apart, it's so they can fall into place in ways we never imagined. The connection between Spirit and Hannah is another highlight. Her unwavering belief in him, even when the odds were stacked against them, shows us the power of compassion and determination. It's a reminder that love, whether it's for an animal, a friend, or a family member, can drive us to do incredible things. And let's talk about the human-animal connection. Spirit, becoming a therapy horse, helping children overcome their fears, is such a touching reminder of the unique ways animals enrich our lives. They're not just companions, they're healers, teachers, and sometimes our greatest sources of strength. What did you think of Spirit's story? Did it inspire you, move you, or make you think differently about life's challenges? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched your heart like it did mine, don't forget to share it with someone who might need a little extra hope today. Until next time, take care, and remember, every challenge carries the seed of a new beginning.